Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. You know, the longer we do this program, and it's the 294th consecutive week that we've been privileged to bring this program to you here in the Valley, I just enjoy it more and more. We have the same guest from last week because she was so awesome. That would be Kathy Kelly, 3-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and as many times as that, a convict, right? We want to give you equal billing on that. Several times in prison for peace and justice actions, though, always for good things. See, when you hear of someone in jail, you should say, well, St. Paul was in jail a long time, and a lot of great saints have been in jail, and most great people, if you really think of it, should have been in jail or were. Jesus passed time in jail. He was judged and convicted. So if you want to know that that's good company, Kathy, thank you for being able to say, I will pay the price for my social justice. It is not free. None of this is being brought to you free. Peace and justice is very costly, as you're finding out the longer you don't have it. Because otherwise, you would be saying, if we don't pay, do we get anything? And nothing comes gratis. Even your education, your health, and thank God for health care, which now will cost, but it will come. But for peace and justice, we want to thank Kathy and Dan and Camille, the founding members, along with Jay Hubble and Ken Hudson of Peace Fresno 9 years ago. We want to thank people who have paid the price for their commitments in peace and justice. There are 3 people here who can tell us about that. Kathy, can you tell us, as an opening thought, something about the importance of being able to pay a price for what we believe in as Christians, as believers, as people of commitment across this table, from all sorts of commitments? Why is it that we should be willing to pay the price?
You know, I was part of a group of people that were fasting in Washington, D.C. in January. I think it was a 12-day fast concerned about the witness against torture. And at one point, the head of Washington, D.C.'s Metro Pax Christi, Bob Cook, after a lot of work, had managed to arrange a Skype conversation between we who were fasting and 7 youngsters in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And, you know, this took a lot of work. It took a lot of phone calling and emailing and arranging and, getting the equipment. And so there were these 7 youngsters huddled around a kerosene lamp in the middle of the night in Afghanistan, and there we were. And at one point, Carmen Trotta from the Catholic Worker in New York sidled over to me and he said, do you think I can ask him about Martin Luther King? And I said, well, sure. And so Carmen said, you know, today is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday here in the United States. Have you ever heard of this guy? And these kids immediately, I know there was no prompting for it, started to give quotes verbatim from speeches by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Boy.
Now that was a key moment in the lives of many people. But Bob Cook was a key person. And he's, you know, kind of one of these unsung heroes. When I was, I suppose, first becoming exposed to feminism, I remember reading the line, the only stars are in the firmament. And when I think about the circle that we most need to expand in the peace movement, in the peace and justice movement, it's the circle of people who are willing to make the flyers, make the phone calls, activate the email trees, the people who are willing to write the articles, send out the newsletters, all of that kind of work. I mean, I think a lot of that kind of work is dedicated these days to making sure that the soccer leagues are functioning and the Little League is functioning, and that's all needed for children. But when we really slow down and think about what our children most need us to do for them, I think it's the work of Peace Fresno. So I'm delighted and privileged to be with you today.
Thank you, Kathy. So Dan, bring us back in time a little bit. You and Camille, Jay and Ken, just a little bit about what motivates you, what got you really inspired to actually commit to something so bold and to stay with it these 9 years.
Well, I guess to start with, I mean, I've been here. I immigrated from Pakistan in 1974 for 36 years, and I'd never done anything like this before. And it was 9/11 that changed everything for me. I mean, I saw and I was in shock just like all the people. And I found out there's going to be a protest at Shaw and Blackstone. And I was there, and then I went to a forum. and just made the decision that I have to start doing this, start standing up for what I believe. And as soon as, it was within less than a month, our government decided to attack Afghanistan on October 7th of 2001. And we started opposing the war, protesting against the war, and started meeting at the Fresno Center for Nonviolence. And that's how Peace Fresno started. So it was a result of protesting the war in Afghanistan, opposing our government's response to 9/11, which started Peace Fresno. And since then, we do the rally every year, and this Peace and Justice Festival that we just had on March 21st is our 9th annual rally in the Valley. So we started doing it in 2002, and in 2003, after United States attacked Iraq, it just coincides with the anniversary of Iraq attack. So this has been going on, and we have done a very good job. This year we got over 80 groups participated. We allowed the vendors to come in, so that increased the number of groups. So we have a broad support of so many peace and justice groups that are supporting what we do. And during the year we do several things: forums, rallies, bringing speakers that want to talk about, and we go first Friday of every month. We are at Sean Blackstone, 4:30 to 6. So it's an ongoing thing, and we are getting involved more and more, like Kathy and Voices for Creative Nonviolence campaign of Peaceable Assembly campaign. So Peace Fresno has talked about it, and we are since our Peace and Justice Festival is over, we will be paying more attention to get involved and holding our representative, the elected representative, responsible for the policy and changing it more towards peace and justice.
Thanks, Dan. Camille, what is it that in these many years now, what is the heart of all this for you?
The heart of it is that our country is still at war. And I think of the horrible things that are happening to people in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's what keeps me going, because as Dan said, we have speakers who come, people like Kathy, who have been, who have seen it, who come back and tell us the truth of what's going on there. And of course there are images in the media, in the mainstream media, of what's going on to some extent. The mainstream media doesn't do the job of telling the story that we need to hear. There's a saying that says, as people living in a democracy, it is the responsibility to stand up to injustices done by our government in our names. That's from the Not in Our Name pledge. And it is our responsibility to stand up against these injustices. And Peace Fresno's job now is to build the peace movement. It's always been our job. Our job is to bring more and more people on board so that the voices are stronger and the voices are louder. And we want to let people know that they can come to Peace Fresno and find a place, no matter what kind of involvement they want to have. There's a place for them to stand up against war. When we first started, there was this huge surge of patriotism right after 9/11. And of course, President Bush was urging everybody to, if you're not with us, meaning him, you're against us, you're against the United States, you're not patriotic. And we didn't believe that, of course. We believe patriotism is standing up for what's right. We've seen such a change now. And most of the people right now in Fresno are opposed to this war. I'm sure of it because I talk to people all the time. And they hate the war for so many different reasons. And so Peace Fresno's job is to make it easy for them to stand up against war.
Now, one person who's been really cooperating so much with all the efforts of Peace Fresno is our beloved Elfie Ballas. And we're going to show a clip right now that builds perfectly on what Kathy shared about how someone like Dr. King is not only an American hero, but also a figure of world repute and world knowledge, even little children in Afghanistan. So we're going to play a clip that shows something that Peace Fresno organized, but that was also filmed by Elfie, and it shows the pastor of the Unitarian Universalist Church, Brian Jessup, reminding us the message of Dr. King, and then we're going to hear Dr. King speaking for himself. Stay tuned for this clip, Courting Spiritual Death.
World War II in this country, we've been beating our plowshares into swords. Huge, huge military expenditures around the world. And President Eisenhower in 1950 said, friends, every bomb that is dropped, every weapon that is made is, in the final sense, a theft. A theft from whom? From the people, from the workers.
Poverty wages have to go! Poverty wages have to go!
From the minds, from the arts. Who are we going to hear today? It's not enough to say, Martin, Martin. We have to do the work. Let's leave this place hearing, seeing the blood of Iraqi babies and Iraqi mommy and daddies is red. It's red. Now is the time to beat our swords back into plowshares. That's the message of Martin Luther King, Jr.
The revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth with righteous indignation. It will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say this is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hand on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death.
Once again, we've reached the half point of our program, so please don't go away. We'll be right back.
For over 25 years, KNXT has been serving the people of the San Joaquin Valley with good family television that's just not available anywhere else. It's important for you, the viewer, to help support this valuable tool of ministry. KNXT needs to continue to grow and bring you important programming about your faith. But sometimes it's hard to stop and find the time. Make it easy. Go to knxt.tv and find out how easy it is to support your Catholic television station, KNXT TV.
Welcome back to the second half of this program with Kathy and Dan and Camille, talking about practical things that we think we can do as a community here in the Valley for peace and justice. Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind is how ugly war is. Sherman said war is hell, and he was what you call a great general. And he is one who would have known that even in doing what he would think was his life's mission, it was not a heavenly task. It was awful. Now, Kathy, you shared something yesterday. You sang a song that reminded us that when Johnny comes marching home again, we're getting the wrong message on that one, because it's really another whole motif that's underneath that story. Would you mind setting that story up and then singing for us, Johnny, we hardly knew you?
Well, yeah, I think all of us remember learning When Johnny Comes Marching Home Again, hurrah, hurrah, but actually that song was predated by another song, and a singer-songwriter in Springfield had made me aware of that, and it struck me so much, because it's one thing for me to talk about what the latest data from the Congressional Research Information Service is about the cost of the war, and we should talk about that, certainly. The United States people will be paying, an average extended family of 7 will be asked to commit $210,000 toward this war effort, and that's something most groupings of 7 could do a lot of other alternative good things with. But the cost of war in terms of what is wreaked upon civilians who bear the brunt and soldiers who bear the brunt. So the original Johnny, We Hardly Knew You tune comes from a song. It was an Irish ballad that was sung as Irish conscripts were returning from a war in the Seychelles, and you're imagining a young woman, Peggy, seeing her beloved Johnny come marching home again, and she sings, "Where are your eyes that looked so mild, hurroo, hurroo? Where are your eyes that looked so mild, hurroo, hurroo? Where are your eyes that looked so mild, when my heart you first beguiled? Oh, why did you run from me and the child? Oh, Johnny, I hardly knew ya. Where are your legs that used to run, hurroo, hurroo? Where are your legs that used to run, hurroo, hurroo? Where are your legs that used to run before you went to carry a gun? I believe your dancing days are done. Oh, Johnny, I hardly knew ya." And it goes on to sing about the body parts that are missing. Finally, she says, "You're an eyeless, legless, chickenless egg. You'll have to be put out with a bowl to beg. Your Peggy will never leave you." But the last verse says, "They're rolling out the guns again. They're rolling out the guns again. But they'll never take our daughters and sons again. Johnny, I'm swearing to you."
That really stopped the crowd yesterday, I think. It was so powerful having you sing it. I wonder if Camille and Dan want to help us unpack the other item we want to talk about, this Peaceable Assembly campaign, and what it is that we can do so that we will not roll out those guns again. What are we going to do? What is Peace Fresno committing to? How can we join up with voices to do something called the Peaceable Assembly campaign, which is a website that you can go to. Why don't you help us understand a little more about it?
Well, Kathy is the second speaker who has come to us to tell us about the importance of going to Congress. And we've known that all along, and we have made visits to our congressmen over the years. But it hasn't ever been a real concerted focus. And Peace Fresno has agreed that once we finished our Peace and Justice Festival, we will make that a focus in the coming months. David Swanson was the other one who reminded us that every 2 years we have a chance to vote on our congressman. So of all of the national representatives, our congressmen are the ones we need to put the pressure on. So we are planning to look at the Peaceable Assembly campaign and also campaigns others are presenting for ways to reach our congressmen. And we are going to need a lot of people to help us with that. And the idea is to be persistent and consistent with it.
And you know, President Obama had said that the troops would come back from Afghanistan in July of 2011. So I think we should be using all the time between now and then to follow up on the Constitution. Congress shall make no law to abridge the right of people to assemble peaceably for redress of grievance. This war is our grievance. And we had done the occupation project where we more or less occupied elected representatives' offices. And 18 elected representatives changed their vote. They had been in favor of supplemental spending for war in Iraq, and after their offices were visited by members of the Occupation Project repeatedly, they changed their vote. Now that's a significant number. We saw in the healthcare debate that a very small number of votes can have a big impact, and so that was to us a sign that we should certainly keep up with this kind of work. But it takes very deliberate organizing so that people prepare themselves, they build their delegation, they go in and they don't take no for an answer and then have to go back again, really, and with a larger group or a more diverse group.
I think the thing about that's so exciting is that you've been effective. And so what we want to do in the peace movement is be effective. And when you have been able to change the votes of 18 congressmen, I call that real success.
I wouldn't attribute it only to us.
Oh, I will. I'll attribute it to you.
But even if we're not effective, do we want to say that we aligned ourselves with the war profiteers and the warmongers who are wrecking our planet and making it uninhabitable and unsustainable for future generations? I think just how can you look a child in the eyes these days and not be finding ways to put our values first and never let inconvenience get in the way of living in accord with our values?
There's basically 4 demands that I think we should just read them once. They're very simple, actually. It's one of those very focused campaigns. The first demand to the President and to the Senate and House to end the wars and the occupations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the occupied Palestinian territories. So that's what's on the table, is to end these wars and occupations in those 4 centers. Secondly, and by logic, to redirect the military spending that would have gone into attacking, bombing, protecting, and invading and occupying, to redirect all that in terms of rebuilding the infrastructure of those 4 places. And then the third, which is seemingly off the point, but it is the point, to develop truly green energy sources and to decrease our use of fossil fuels, which is really a whole way of deciding we will not go to war for oil or for other energy sources. We will not build an economy that is needing those fossil fuels anymore. We'll develop a new way to live. So it's very much part of the package. And that would be to the President, the House, and the Senate. Now, to the House and the Senate alone, this one is very clear. To publicly commit to vote against all additional funding for war beyond what will be necessary for the withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan. So having said that that's our project, what does the panel want to say?
Well, one of the major consumers of fossil fuel is U.S. military. We are spending, our defense budget in 2011 is approaching $750 billion. We spend more money than rest of the world combined. So that's over 190 countries. We spend more money than rest of the world combined. We have spent or already, the money is set aside to close to $1 trillion for just the 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So as you read the demand, that money should be directed to do social good, not only in Afghanistan and Iraq, but right here in the United States, because we have a crumbling infrastructures, unemployment is rising, the foreclosures are on the rise, so we have so many problems, and healthcare is a problem. So all of those things, all of those resources can be spent better here and everywhere else.
Final thoughts. We have now the second program almost coming to a conclusion, but I think our panel would get now another 30 seconds of a final statement that they'd like to go on record. I think we could make it into a challenge or a charge to our viewers I'll be the last one, but Kathy, would you start us, challenging us to what it is we can do?
Howard Zinn said there's no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people. And what we can do is make our voices heard to say that we want this war to end, that we want the troops to come home now, and then find where we can fit in peace movement organizing between now and July 2011, making it a priority in our lives.
Dan.
Well, I think dissent has been called the highest form of patriotism. So standing up for what's right and then standing up to point out what's not right and make it right. And that's what we do at Peace Fresno, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you. Camille.
I'm going to ask people to go to www.peacefresno.org. I'm going to say it again, www.peacefresno.org. They can find out how to enter the movement here in Fresno. And it's important that there are peace groups all over the United States, and we are one of many. And that way we are pressuring Congress all around the United States. So not just in the large centers of government, but we need to do it here at home. Join us.
I really have to thank our panel today. Kathy Kelly, all the way from Chicago, but then she's on her way, as I found out, to Detroit and to points in Canada to continue her crusade. Of course, she's saving room to spend 10 days in jail in May because she has taken a stand. And Dan and Camille have also taken a stand. Often, every month, they're at Blackstone and Shaw, but then they're also during the week doing many commitments in honor of peace and justice locally, in the state, across the nation, and reaching out to the whole world. I hope that you have been provoked, stimulated, and almost bothered by these pair of programs, as I have been too, to decide we will spend more time this next year doing things for peace and justice than we did last year. God bless.